A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, Book the Third, The Track of a Storm, Chapter 8, A Hand at Cards. Again, it is a very hot day here at Kentley Studios in Seattle, Washington, so I am recording with my window open. Apologies for the street noise. Happily unconscious of the new calamity at home, Miss Pross threaded her way along the narrow streets and crossed the river by the bridge of the Point Neuf. Reckoning in her mind the number of indispensable purchases she had to make, Mr. Cruncher, with the basket, walked at her side. They both looked to the right and to the left into most of the shops they passed, had a wary eye for all gregarious assemblages of people, and turned out of their road to avoid any very excited group of talkers. It was a raw evening, and the misty river, blurred to the eye with blazing lights and to the ear with harsh noises, showed where the barges were stationed, in which the smiths worked, making guns for the army of the Republic. Woe to the man who played tricks with that army, or got undeserved promotion in it. Better for him that his beard had never grown, for the national razor shaved him close. Having purchased a few small articles of grocery, and a measure of oil for the lamp, Miss Pross bethought herself of the wine they wanted. After peeping into several wine shops, she stopped at the sign of the good Republican Brutus of antiquity not far from the National Palace, once, and twice, the Tuileries, where the aspect of things rather took her fancy. It had a quieter look than any other place of the same description they had passed, and though red with patriotic caps, was not so red as the rest. Sounding Mr. Cruncher and finding him of her opinion, Miss Pross resorted to the good Republican Brutus of antiquity, attended by her cavalier. Slightly observant of the smoky lights, of the people, pipe in mouth, playing with limp cards and yellow dominoes, of the one bare-breasted, bare-armed, soot-begrimed workman reading a journal aloud, and of the others listening to him, of the weapons worn or laid aside to be resumed, of the 2 or 3 customers fallen forward asleep, who, in the popular high-shouldered, shaggy black spencer, looked in that attitude like slumbering bears or dogs, the 2 outlandish customers approached the counter and showed what they wanted. As their wine was measuring out, a man parted from another man in a corner, and rose to depart. In going, he had to face Miss Pross. No sooner did he face her than Miss Pross uttered a scream and clapped her hands. In a moment the whole company were on their feet. That somebody was assassinated by somebody vindicating a difference of opinion was the likeliest occurrence. Everybody looked to see somebody fall, but only saw a man and woman standing staring at each other, the man with all the outward aspect of a Frenchman, and a thorough Republican, the woman evidently English. What was said in this disappointing anticlimax by the disciples of the good Republican Brutus of antiquity, except that it was something very voluble and loud, would have been as so much Hebrew or Chaldean to Miss Pross and her protector, though they had been all ears. But they had no ears for anything in their surprise, for it must be recorded that not only was Miss Pross lost in amazement and agitation, but Mr. Cruncher, though it seemed on his own separate and individual account, was in a state of the greatest wonder. "What is the matter?" said the man who had caused Miss Pross to scream, speaking in a vexed, abrupt voice, though in a low tone and in English. "Oh, Solomon! Dear Solomon!" cried Miss Pross, clapping her hands again. "After not setting eyes upon you or hearing of you for so long a time, do I find you here?" "Don't call me Solomon. Do you want to be the death of me?" asked the man in a furtive, frightened way. "Brother! Brother!" cried Miss Pross, bursting into tears. "Have I ever been so hard with you that you ask me such a cruel question?" "Then hold your meddlesome tongue," said Solomon, "and come out if you want to speak to me. Pay for your wine and come out. Who's this man?" Miss Pross, shaking her loving and dejected head at her by no means affectionate brother, said through her tears, "Mr. Cruncher." "Let him come out too," said Solomon. "Does he think me a ghost?" Apparently Mr. Cruncher did, to judge from his looks. He said not a word, however, and Miss Pross, exploring the depths of her reticule through her tears with great difficulty, paid for the wine. As she did so, Solomon turned to the following of good Republican Brutus of antiquity, and offered a few words of explanation in the French language, which caused them all to relapse into their former places and pursuits. "Now," said Solomon, stopping at the dark street corner, "what do you want?" "How dreadfully unkind in a brother nothing has ever turned my love away from," cried Miss Pross, "to give me such a greeting and show me no affection." "There, confound it, there," said Solomon, making a dab at Miss Pross's lips with his own. "Now are you content?" Miss Pross only shook her head and wept in silence. "If you expect me to be surprised," said her brother Solomon, "I am not surprised. I knew you were here. I know most people who are here. If you really don't want to endanger my existence, which I half believe you do, go your ways as soon as possible and let me go mine. I am busy. I am an official." "My English brother Solomon," moaned Miss Pross, casting up her tear-fraught eyes, "that had the markings in him of one of the best and greatest men in his native country, an official among foreigners, and such foreigners, I would almost sooner have seen the dear boy lying in his—" "I said so," cried her brother, interrupting. "I knew it. You want to be the death of me. I shall be rendered suspected by my own sister just as I am getting on." "The gracious and merciful heavens forbid!" cried Miss Pross. "Far rather would I never see you again, dear Solomon, though I have ever loved you truly and ever shall. Say but one affectionate word to me, and tell me there is nothing anger or estranged between us, and I will detain you no longer." Good Miss Pross, as if the estrangement between them had come of any culpability of hers, as if Mr. Lorry had not known it for a fact years ago in the quiet corner of Soho that this precious brother had spent her money and left her. He was saying the affectionate word, however, with a far more grudging condescension and patronage. Excuse me, than he could have shown if their relative merits and positions had been reversed, which is invariably the case all the world over, when Mr. Cruncher, touching him on the shoulder, hoarsely and unexpectedly interposed with the following singular question. "I say, might I ask a favour as to whether your name is John Solomon or Solomon John?" The official turned toward him with a sudden distrust. He had not previously uttered a word. "Come," said Mr. Cruncher, "speak out, you know." Which, by the way, was more than he could do himself. "John Solomon or Solomon John? She calls you Solomon, and she must know, being your sister, and I know you're John, you know. Which of the two goes first? And regarding the name of Pross, likewise, that weren't your name over the water." "What do you mean?" "Well, I don't know all I mean, for I can't call to mind what your name was over the water." "No," sneered Solomon. "No, but I swear it was a name of 2 syllables. "Indeed?" "Yes. T'other one was 1 syllable. I know you. You was a spy witness at the Bailey. What, in the name of the father of lies, own father to yourself, was you called at that time?" "Barsad," said another voice, striking in. "That's the name for £1,000, cried Jerry. The speaker, who struck in, was Sidney Carton. He had his hands behind him, under the skirts of his riding-coat, and he stood at Mr. Cruncher's elbow as negligently as he might have stood at the Old Bailey itself. "Don't be alarmed, my dear Miss Pross. I arrived at Mr. Lorry's, to his surprise, yesterday evening. We agreed that I would not present myself elsewhere until all was well, or unless I could be useful. I presented myself here to beg a little talk with your brother. I wish you had a better employed brother than Mr. Barsad. I wish for your sake Mr. Barsad was not a sheep of the prisons." Sheep was the cant word of a time for a spy under the gaolers, the spy who the pale turned paler, and asked him how he dared. "I'll tell you," said Sidney. "I lighted on you, Mr. Barsad, coming out of the prison of the consigliere. Well, I was contemplating the walls an hour or more ago.
You have a face to be remembered, and I remember faces well, made curious by seeing you in that connection, and having a reason to which you are no stranger, for associating with you with the misfortunes of a friend, now very unfortunate. I walked in your direction, I walked into your wine shop here, close after you, and sat near you. I had no difficulty in deducing from your unreserved conversation, and the rumor openly going about among your admirers, the nature of your calling, and gradually what I have done at random seemed to shape itself into a purpose, Mr. Bassard.
What purpose? The spy asked.
It would be troublesome and might be dangerous to explain in the street. Could you favor me in confidence with some minutes of your company at the office of Tellson's Bank, for instance?
Under a threat?
Oh, did I say that?
Then why should I go there?
Really, Mr. Bassard, I can't say if you can't.
Do you mean you won't say, sir? The spy irresolutely asked.
You apprehended me very clearly. Mr. Bassard. I won't.
Carton's negligent recklessness of manner came powerfully in aid of his quickness of skill in such a business as he had in his secret mind, and with such a man as he had to do with. His practised eye saw it, and he made the most of it. Now, I told you, said the spy, casting a reproachful look at his sister, if any trouble comes of this, it's your doing.
Come, Mr. Bassard, exclaimed Sidney. Don't be ungrateful, but for my great respect for your sister, I might not have led up so pleasantly to a little proposal that I wish to make for our mutual satisfaction. Do you go with me to the bank? I'll hear what you have got to say. Yes, I'll go with you. I propose that we first conduct your sister safely to the corner of her own street. Let me take your arm, Miss Pross. This is not a good city at any time for you to be out of, unprotected, and as your escort knows, Mr. Bassard, I will invite him to Mr. Lorry's with us. Are we ready? Come, then.
Miss Pross recalled soon afterward, and to the end of her life remembered, that as she pressed her hands on Sidney's arm, and looked up in his face, imploring him to do no hurt to Solomon, there was a braced purpose in the arm, and a kind of inspiration in the eyes, which not only contradicted his light manner, but changed and raised the man. She was too much occupied then with fears for her brother, who so little deserved her affection, and with Sidney's friendly reassurances adequately to heed what she observed. They left her at the corner of the street, and Carton led the way to Mr. Lorry's, which was within a few minutes' walk. John Barsad, or Solomon Pross, walked at his side. Mr. Lorry had just finished his dinner, and was sitting before a cheery little log or two of fire, perhaps looking into their blaze for the picture of that younger elderly gentleman from Tellson's, who had looked into the red coals at the Royal George at Dover, now a good many years ago. He turned his head as they entered, and showed the surprise with which he saw a stranger.
Miss Pross's brother, sir, said Sidney. Mr. Bassard.
Bassard, repeated the old gentleman. Bassard? I have an association with the name, and with the face.
I told you. He had a remarkable face, Mr. Bassard, observed Carton coolly. Pray, sit down.
As he took a chair himself, he supplied the link that Mr. Lorry wanted by saying to him with a frown, "Witness at the trial." Mr. Lorry immediately remembered and regarded his new visitor with an undisguised look of abhorrence.
Mr. Bassard has been recognized by Miss Pross as the affectionate brother you have heard of, said Sidney, and has acknowledged the relationship. I pass to worse news. Darnay has been arrested again.
Struck with consternation, the old gentleman exclaimed,
"What do you tell me? I left him safe and free within these 2 hours, and am about to return to him."
And there we will pause.